While most of our favorite summer festivals are one day or one weekend only, Ravinia's festival season is all summer long. Pick from over 100 great concerts between now and September, and I kind of need y'all help. For real, this ain't even an ad anymore. I need to know which show or shows I should go to. We got The Roots, or a Chicago Philharmonic tribute to Whitney Houston, or we got TLC and Shaggy. I can't decide, but what I do know is at some point, I'm out there with a loaded picnic bag and a nice blanket. But you can get yourself a pavilion seat if you like. Buy your tickets now only at ravinia.org. All right, for real though, who should I pick? Today on CityCast Chicago, we're breaking down Brandon Johnson's new Reparations Task Force, Cook County Jail's deadliest year in decades, and the second annual CBA Summit in Woodlawn. Joining me are from the Tribe, Tonya Hill, and from Injustice Watch, Carlos Ballesteros. It's Friday, June 21st. I'm Jacoby Cochran, and this is what Chicago's talking about. If you are new to CityCast Chicago, every Friday we like to bring our friends in to look back on some stories from the week. Tonya, good morning. It's good to see you, my friend.
Good morning. It's good to see you too. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Carlos, welcome back to the podcast. It's always good to hear your voice.
Good morning, and thanks for having me, man.
We got some big stories to talk about this week, but we are going to start a little bit light because last weekend, like every weekend during the summer, there was a ton of things to do outside between all of the amazing Juneteenth festivals and celebrations. You had Summer Smash, a Rib Fest. There were so many things going on last week. But I want to know what's at the top of your list either this weekend or as June is winding down, because when I look at my calendar, we only got one more full week of June before the year is technically halfway over. Tonya, what's still on your calendar to do in June?
I want to go out more to the river walk.
Okay.
I've been seeing a lot of TikToks from Chicago creators that are like just dropping all these different brunch things to do out there, little explorations you can take. And yeah, I was just out there going to Winter's Jazz with my dad for Father's Day. And it was just really beautiful out there. Just a bunch of restaurants and people just vibing alongside the water. So I'm definitely interested in hanging out there again.
I really feel like there is a little bit of everything. I'm glad to see. I mean, the Riverwalk, what it looks like now in comparison to when we was kids, G, is a complete 180. Like you said, you can go just sit out there and listen to music. You can go kayaking on the river, right? The number of restaurants, the number of places you can go and stop and get a quick drink. I'm not going to say, the one thing I will say, and this is no shade because I think the Riverwalk is for everybody. But people who run on the Riverwalk, I said they a different kind of people, G. I feel like 90% of the folks on the Riverwalk is just trying to move slowly, trying to take their time, maybe trying to walk their dog, trying to chill. And then you just got people kind of running through, and they always, a few of them got this like get out the way kind of. I'm like, G, you on the, what are you doing? Like we relaxing and you out here running, like do your thing, but I feel like you want to be seen. You want to be seen. But we get it. We get it. So yeah, I want that for you too, G. Getting out on the river more. Carlos, over to you. What's something that's still on your to-do list this June?
So before June ends, I want to and I will make it out to the beach. I haven't gone to the beach yet. First, it was like not hot enough, and then it was way too hot. I'm hoping this week offers some middle ground there to enjoy some time on the beach.
What's your beach of choice?
Oh, that's tough. I do love 31st Street Beach, especially when Pier 31 is having their parties. Those are always very fun.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a dog, so we take him up to Montrose Dog Beach sometimes, which is always fun. But honestly, any beach is a good beach. And the Point, obviously.
Tonya, what about you?
I also like 31st Street Beach, but it is a lot of people that be out there, so it'd be crowded. So I'm not a real like I know how to swim in indoor pools, but I would not be swimming for real in Lake Michigan. So I would probably go as high to as my waist. But I really had a good time like a year or so back at 63rd Street Beach. A little less people.
I feel that. I feel right. I'm really keen to like maybe walking out on the beach behind the South Shore Cultural Center. I love
I was gonna say
lack of
that.
people
Yeah.
that be out there. But I couldn't finish this conversation without saying, with the tragedies that we've already seen early this summer around the water, whether folks going out into the playpen, people swimming in Lake Michigan, I want for both of y'all and for everybody listening, be as safe as possible. Look at the weather ahead of time. We've dropped water safety tips in our June guide and our episodes on chicago.citycast.fm. So please, if you're going to go into the water, whether the river, whether Lake Michigan, or even in Chicago's public and private pools, please be as safe as possible in the water as we try to escape this heat. Again, this week, we've got our friends Tonia Hill and Carlos Ballesteros to break down some big stories. And Tonia, I want to start with an announcement that came out this week as we were celebrating Juneteenth. Mayor Brandon Johnson officially announced his reparations task force. Now, this is something he campaigned on, something that he put $500,000 aside in his 2024 budget. Can you talk about this announcement and what it means?
Yes. So as you said, the mayor on Monday announced the formation of a reparations task force that will be working to create a Black reparations agenda. And this is, like you said, a part of his campaign promise. The city budget, also appropriated $500,000 for this effort. But just like some of the things the executive order says about, actually having a public apology to Black Chicagoans, just looking at all the disparities, looking at housing, looking at education, looking at the Black wealth gap. But something I thought was really interesting is I actually went out to Inglewood and talked to some people there. And, obviously Black people are not a monolith. And we just all have different ideas about what reparations should be and what it can be. So just getting some ideas from them, about pathways to homeownership, paying for education if you want to go to college or graduate school. Also just, more incentives for small businesses, having working infrastructure, all of these different things that like we've seen divestment in Black communities to be, uplifted in this moment. And thinking further about what it means, I was wondering, we've seen a lot of backlash over the last 4 years since George Floyd's murder, and thinking about how for a moment it felt like there was some progress and some momentum moving and reparations kind of hit mainstream. So it's just, I've been questioning, is this still the right time?
In Brandon Johnson's announcement, as you point out, he specifically named ways in which Chicago's government in particular harmed Black Chicagoans, through mechanisms of systemic racism, particularly redlining, racial restrictive covenants, mass displacement with the indiscriminate demolition of Chicago's public housing projects, the mass closing of public schools and the like. And you talk about, speaking with different community members. You talk to Michelle Rashad, Chicago law resident and the executive director of Imagine Inglewood. And she talked about exactly, thinking reparations looks like free education, free health care, a pathway towards home and land ownership. Valerie Hall, a Southside resident who you talked to, said, senior citizens want to see a guaranteed income pilot. We did an episode on Evanston's passing reparations and what that looks like and how it's singularly focused on housing inequities. In Chicago, we've seen money set aside for a task force, for a task force, for a task force. And now this is a task force to develop an agenda. And hopefully then that agenda is acted on. It is great to have these ceremonial announcements, especially around important Black holidays. But how confident are you? We saw Mayor Lightfoot put together a task force to explore reparations that only met twice. How confident are folks that this will be more than symbolic?
Yeah, just from what talking to the mayor, I talked to him after this happened, and just looking at the framework of it, how they have these like different days that are earmarked, rather like, okay, so at the 30-day mark this should happen, at the 60-day mark this should happen, 90-day, and then like, at the year mark there should be a public report that's available that's like summarizing all of these recommendations from this task force. So just, I mean, looking at it from that point of view, that there are some benchmarks that they're trying to reach, I think should give some people a sense of hope. But I think the other thing, just from reading the comments after we posted the story, it's like people just want it right now, whatever
Hmm.
that is. So I think there's like going to be some balance between, okay, yes, we're studying, we're really trying to make sure we do this right so that we can implement these things, but also like with the will of the people who are just want something to happen right now, like whatever that may be.
Hmm.
I think the point about like how many more studies do we need to figure out this problem is very important because yes, while I welcome this new reparations committee, I think we should also remember that people have been studying this stuff for a long, long time, and there are already plenty of great reports that show
Hmm.
the damage done against the black population in Chicago and like how that reflects in today's dollars. Just one of these studies I remember I wrote about when I was at the Chicago Sun-Times in 2019. It was a study from Duke University, published that year, which found that black home buyers in Chicago lost at least $3 billion in today's dollars because of racist real estate policies and predatory contracts between 1950 and 1970. And one thing that has always stuck with me from that report is that it makes an effort to say the people who plundered the black community in Chicago have names, have businesses. They are still around. Um,
They have family
they have
legacies.
family legacies, right? And that it was doctors, it was lawyers, it was everyday people that were taking advantage of these practices. And I say that to say, yes, we should study more on how Chicago can and should do reparations. But we also should remember that we already know a lot about this issue. There's already a lot of research on it. And I think that's maybe part of the reason why there's so much backlash against these kinds of efforts, because they're seen as like trying to pin yesterday's problems on today's population or whatever. But it wasn't that long ago. And
Fact.
two,
It's still going on.
exactly, it's still going on, and the financial benefits that came from that plundering are still being felt and enjoyed.
Our second story today takes us to an investigation at Cook County Jail done by Carlos Ballesteros. Carlos, I mean, we last week were talking about Cook County Jail's population falling in the last few years, and yet your reports show that the number of deaths are on the rise and at their height in the last few decades. What's going on here?
Cook County Jail, like you said, has seen its population of detainees continuously fall over the last decade, and particularly since the abolition of cash bail last year. But what we found in our investigation is that the number of deaths in 2023 were the highest since 2013. Um, Back then, the jail's population was twice as high as it was last year. So that means that when you measure it as a mortality rate, as a rate of people dying, 2023 was the deadliest year at the jail on record. We couldn't find any other year in the data that had a higher mortality rate. And so we dug into these 18 deaths at the jail, and what we found is that at least in the lead up to at least half of these deaths, there were instances of inappropriate, inadequate supervision and medical care. And we're talking about disturbing circumstances where like people were dead for an hour or longer before anyone noticed. We're talking about people who were not being properly supervised against state law. We're talking about people who were in the jail for years and ended up dying without ever knowing that they had like a brain tumor. There's one particular case. One disturbing aspect of all of this, and perhaps our most important finding from the investigation, is that Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart was not reporting these troubling circumstances behind these deaths to state regulators as he should have been. And he wasn't. He was also failing to update the families of people who died in his custody on the circumstances leading up to their deaths, as he's required to do under state law as well. And so there was a lack of oversight that was readily apparent to us after we started digging in. And we had the fortune of being able to reach 6 families of people who died at the jail last year and provide them with some sort of answers as to what happened to their loved ones. And, it's important that I also mention that the fact that, there hasn't been a death at the jail since Christmas. So all of 2024, they haven't had a death. And Sheriff Tom Dart has successfully reduced the number of suspected overdoses too, which accounted for a majority. Still, though, the issues around supervision, medical care, and the lack of reporting of these issues to state regulators is present and warrants a lot of attention.
Yeah. I mean, what does it continue to say that even as we put reform efforts on the books, for example, the simple, I'd argue, common sense and humane thing to do, which is to inform families, right? It's on the books, but people are not responding to it, right? It's on the books to report to state regulators. People are not, upholding that. What does it say that we have the measures intact and yet we still see officials ignoring them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really important question. And I think there are a few answers. Ultimately, people who are in jail don't have a lot of representation, both in the media or in the political sphere. And so their interests are often left to the wayside, and the interests of their families too. And I think also, when I spoke to experts on correctional oversight about what we found at Cook County Jail, what I kept hearing is that, these oversight measures, while better than most across the country, for most years across the country, really lack any effective enforcement mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a lack of monitoring at the jail on a local level. Technically, the Illinois Department of Corrections is in charge of monitoring all 96 jails across the state. But that doesn't give them much time, really, to find issues at individual jails, especially since they're understaffed there as well. And so what the experts kept telling me is that perhaps it's time for a more local, independent body to be created by Cook County officials to monitor the jail on a consistent basis, on a permanent basis, that is able to promote transparency and inform the public about these kinds of issues.
I appreciate the work that you did in this investigation to reach out to these families, to try to find out what is possible in regards to enforcement. And so we were going to drop links to both of these stories that we just discussed in our show notes. Tonia, we are coming up on the first anniversary of record rainfall across the Chicagoland area, but it disproportionately impacted families on the far west side of Chicago. And some of those families, largely Black families, are still in need of service and aid. We did an episode on this. I want to say a few months ago that said Chicago and Illinois at large is not prepared for this record rainfall. What are we hearing from families still struggling?
Yeah, so I am still getting updates from Princess Shaw and the folks from the West Side Long-Term Recovery Group. And they spent yesterday going out and cleaning out basements of mostly seniors. That's something that I think people should really know. Like, this really, really hits senior citizens very hard, and they're not able, obviously, to do the type of cleanup that they need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Back in February, I went to a press conference with the West Side, recovery group, and they were asking for the mayor to dedicate some funds to this. And, people, homeowners, like still not being able to have what they need to take care of basements, flooding, mold issues. And again, like I said, a lot of the women that I talked to are senior citizens. So it's just been a very unfortunate process for them. But I just don't want us to forget that there's a community still grappling with the impact of this.
Yeah, the long-term health impacts, the long-term impacts on people's housing. Uh, I mean, it goes without saying that there was not enough resources made available to people, and it left a lot of families scrambling. And the fact that we're still a year out, and folks are just now being able to access like even something like cleaning, the extensive cleaning needed in their home. So again, Tonya, thank you so much for drawing attention to this. Carlos, I want to bring you back in here. WBEZ's Chip Mitchell dropped some great reporting this week. He traveled over to Colombia to talk about the number of Venezuelans who have immigrated to Colombia over the last decade and what Chicago can learn, as we have seen over 30,000 Venezuelans arrive to the city during, our ongoing housing crisis. Can you break down some of the things that Chip learned?
I really enjoyed reading Chip's stories on this issue. I think that they had the ability, him and a photographer had the ability to go to Colombia. And I think, first of all, it's important to realize that a place like Colombia, which is a poorer country, a smaller country than ours, has welcomed 4 times as many Venezuelans as the United States, because it is so hard to reach our border, first of all, and then to make it in successfully. And Chip's reporting shows how that a poorer, smaller country has been able to integrate millions of Venezuelans, thousands of Venezuelans. And his reporting also shows that the Venezuelan community has contributed greatly to Colombia, both in the economic sense, but also in a cultural sense. And I think that part of the narrative is missing here in Chicago. We think of new arrivals as takers, as a nuisance, as criminals, and we don't consider how they are making our city so much better. And I think it's important for us to, as reporters, to highlight those stories as well. This country celebrates the history of Ellis Island, welcoming millions and millions of people over decades, and yet do not realize how they are closing the door on people coming in now. And the crisis at hand is manufactured in the sense that we don't have to live this way. I think when I talk about reframing this issue as a housing crisis, I really do hope that people maybe perhaps understand a little bit better that we're all on the same side here. We're all facing rent hikes. We're all facing a lack of housing. We are allies in this struggle. And the scapegoating of immigrants just needs to stop.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Chip points out in his story that we are continuing to see a rise of xenophobia, both in Chicago, in Colombia, and as, economic sanctions from the United States on Venezuela increase as their economy continues to see downturns, we will likely see more and more people come into the city of Chicago, regardless of how Biden enforces his immigrant policies. How do you see us sort of like stemming off this rising tide of xenophobia in the city?
I struggle with this in my own family members who are immigrants themselves, who see new arrivals as somehow different than them. And it's taken conversation after conversation with them to hopefully make them see things better. I want to celebrate Dilla, our favorite Chicago historian. He had a video very recently talking about this issue and how hating on immigrants is a Chicago tradition. That anytime a new group comes into the city, they are hated on by everyone else. And ultimately, those groups can then later kind of like become part of our fabric here, which is great. But I think we can just skip that first step entirely and stop the hate. Just welcome people.
I'm also getting very frustrated by the anti-immigrant conversations that I am dealing with personally and just seeing on social media as well. But I just really think, as Carlos was saying, it just really goes back to like if everybody had, what they needed, I really think this idea of this group has this and I don't have that would stop, because I just feel like that's a lot of the issue too. It's like they have this or they're getting that, but just thinking about the totality of everything. Like, yes, our communities need stuff, but they're in a more immediate need right now, and we should be doing what we can to help them.
Again, we have been joined by Tonia Hill from The Tribe and Carlos Ballesteros from Injustice Watch. Every single episode of CityCast Chicago ends the same way, and that's with some good news. Tonia, what is your good news for CityCast Chicago today?
Yes, I think the cicadas are leaving the South Side. I think they're not as loud, and basically I've been trying to just walk more, and it's been seeming impossible because I am swinging at the air because they're just landing on me. And I know I look crazy to people driving past, but it's been crazy how they're just really concentrated. It feels like in this where I live, they feel like they're really here. I don't really experience them anywhere else in the city.
I experienced them for the first time over the weekend out in Bridgeview, but most of the people I've talked to haven't really seen them, right? It's always been cicada mania this, cicada mania that. We finna get a 200-year experience, and then it fell flat for a lot of people. But you saying in your neighborhood, where you stay at, and what has the last few weeks been like, looked like, sounded like?
Disgusting. Like just really disgusting, honestly. Cause I'm just like first, like I was calling them dumb, and I was like, maybe I shouldn't have called them dumb because I just didn't understand, like, you're landing on like literally my car covered in them. Always. My parents' cars covered in them. They're everywhere. But they don't fly away when I'm driving, so they end up dying. So I'm just like, I don't think these are very smart bugs. Maybe just having been underground for so long, you're just not very smart. But I took that back after, being assaulted recently, and them landing on me. So I'm like, maybe they're not dumb. Maybe they're getting used to it.
Maybe they're
So,
vengeful. Maybe they're
yes,
planners, 13, 17 years to plot their revenge.
yes.
Well, I am glad that it is receding for you, and I'm sorry that while I've been over here kind of pretending like, oh, it was all hype, all media hype. I'm sorry. I've been very
nice.
privileged. Yes, I'm very sorry for that. I need to change my ways. Carlos, what about you? What is your some good news?
I'm only laughing because I'm imagining myself singing that tune and how bad it would come out.
And we always down to listen.
I'm not. My good news of the week is something that I personally didn't have the privilege of attending, but my sister did, which is the return of Chief Keef to Chicagoland to perform last Sunday. Historic moment. My sister said it was a great show. It's really wild how it had been more than a decade since Chief Keef performed anywhere near the city, which I think is a testament to how he was scapegoated by a lot of powerful people for systemic issues that have plagued the city for a long time. And so seeing him return, seeing him with this big smile on stage and performing his songs was really cool. And I hope he comes back soon.
Yeah, I was out there. It was a lot of folks, very packed in. At one point, they tried to evacuate people for a pending thunderstorm. And a lot of them kids said, I ain't going nowhere, Jack. I'm standing right here. But that led to an anxiety that was growing throughout the 3-day festival, which was, is this going to happen?
Right.
Is he actually going to perform? Is he actually going to show up? Will it be allowed in the ways that we like? And it was one of the most energetic moments I've ever seen. 40,000 people kind of going crazy. And to see him, like you said, a decade plus removed from being scapegoated in these ways, sort of put up as this symbol of all the things wrong with Chicago. And now 10 years later to see him being celebrated for not only for how he has helped change and ushered in Chicago's music scene, but to see how he's grown as a performer,
Right.
to see him on Father's Day out there with his daughter. My homie was just like, man, it felt like I was at a family reunion watching it. We've been watching KK for so long, and so it was a great moment. And anybody saying it was mid, bro, don't speak on Keef's name, don't speak on Sosa name. You don't know what you're talking about. So yes, it was a fantastic show. I think it closed out, a growing festival very beautifully. It was a good night. One more thing before we get out of here. Not Me, we and the CBA Coalition are hosting their second annual CBA Summit this Saturday from 12 to 2 p.m. at Hyde Park Academy in Woodlawn, where Mayor Brandon Johnson and Alderman Desmond Yancey are expected to join the community to talk about rising displacement, housing insecurity, and protections in the CBA for South Shore. For folks not familiar with the forthcoming Obama Presidential Center in Jackson Park, organizers have worked tirelessly for almost a decade to secure a CBA for surrounding neighborhoods that would put in writing protection for renters and homeowners, create easier routes to reappropriate vacant land for affordable housing, reinvigorate business corridors in South Shore and other neighborhoods. You can learn more about this summit in our show notes. Of course, I got to give a huge thank you to our guest today, Tonia. Thank you for making it back to CityCast Chicago. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This was great.
And Carlos, thank you for all the work you do. We appreciate you making time for us.
Thank you guys. Have a good day.
Before we get out of here, I got to give a huge thank you to the people who make CityCast Chicago possible. That's our executive producer, Simone Alicea, our producer, Michelle Navarro, our Hey Chicago newsletter editor, Sydney Madden, roving newsletter editor, Natalia Aldana. The music we all love is from Sam Thousand, All the Kimonos, and Mark Greenberg from the Mayfair Workshop. And my last thank you, as it is with every episode, every week, is for you, the people who listen to CityCast Chicago. Whether you listen every single day, this is your first episode, you listen on 2 times speed, you listen on a Saturday to all of the episodes on the week, you only listen to Tuesday and Friday, you listen every now and then when you remember that we exist, whenever, however, we appreciate you. We gonna be back bright and early on Monday. Will you? If you like what we doing, pull up. Peace. I don't know. I actually have no real metrics of knowing if you specifically will be back. But I'm gonna be here